The power of digital dentures, simplifying the process. I want to start by thanking our sponsors, Colteen, Oral Arts Dental Laboratories, and Romero Dental Seminars for making this webinar series available to all of us. I also want to promote my YouTube channel, Romero Dental Seminars. There's today more than 150 videos that have been uploaded, webinars, all related to dental topics, and they are all for free. So please make sure to hit on the like button and subscribe to our channel so that you can get instant notifications every time we upload a new video. Thank you for supporting us. I also want to remind all of our viewers that our upcoming Mastering Porcelain Veneers, a complete hands-on seminar from preparation to cementation, will happen this year, Friday, September 19th, or Saturday, September 20th. You have one of the two options here in Sarasota, Florida. There's 2 sessions, 15 spots available per session. We only have actually 15 spots left because we already have 15 people sign up for the course. So make sure to visit our webpage or to click on the link below so that you can register for this course, and we'll be more than happy to meet you in person here in Sarasota, Florida. 3 CE credits for lecture and 9 for participation will be given throughout this course. I also want to promote my new book, Minimally Invasive Aesthetic Dentistry, The No Drill Techniques. This book has just came out. Quintessence is the publisher, and you can get it now as an introductory price for $98. You have 4 different QR codes that you can use depending on the area of the world that you're in. So please support our efforts through purchasing our book. And if you have any questions once you purchase the book, please don't hesitate to reach out to us through our YouTube channel or our Instagram account, Romero Dental Seminars. Again, thank you for your support. Okay, so my objectives for today's presentation are 3 very well defined. The first one, highlight the clinical steps for preliminary impressions in regards to digital dentures. The second one will be review the steps for the trial denture design. And finally, highlight the clinical steps for final impression and delivery of our dentures. Now, the first thing that I want to share with you, that I want to try to convey with you, is I want to try to simplify this as much as possible. As we know, dentures can be a very long process in our practices when we're doing analog dentures. Sometimes 3 to 4 or 5 appointments. 3 would be amazing. It's never 3. It's always 4 or 5 appointments. The trial, the bases, the impressions, get back to the lab. They have to ship it to you, get it to you, send it back with changes. It's really very, very difficult now that I compare what I used to do some years back compared to what I'm doing today when it comes to digital dentures. This is really the way to go, and I'm going to make it as simple as I can. So first, let's go into options for preliminary impressions. And there's only 2 options that I'm going to give you here, because either you have a patient that walks through your door and this patient has existing dentures, as my first patient that I'm going to share here with you, or you have a patient that walks through the door of your office and has no dentures whatsoever, and you have to start from 0. So there's going to be 2 slightly different approaches here, but let me start with the first one, the most common one. The patient that walks through your door has existing dentures, they're ill-fitting at this moment in their life, and now they want new dentures. How do you convert this information and try to make everything digital to try to simplify things and try to make these dentures in no more than 3 appointments? So of course, let me go back one, I'm sorry. So the first thing that we do is that using the patient's existing dentures, we do what we call a wash impression. And I don't even use adhesive for this. I literally just dry the denture inside, try to clean it as best as I can, dry both the upper and the lower tissues inside the patient's mouth, and then I inject, and I do one at a time, I inject just light material, kind of like, around the borders of the denture and in the integral surface, most importantly, and I take that into the patient's mouth. I move the muscles, just massage the face, just like you would do with any other impression. I allow this material to set. I will start doing the upper or the maxillary arch first, and then once that is set, I do the same thing for the mandibular arch. And again, just using light material, no adhesive on the denture bases. The idea is that this is only a temporary impression that you want to use to get this information inside your computer through your scanner. And then you just want to make sure that you can peel off this and give the dentures, peel it off easily and give it back to your patients so that they can take the old dentures, they can put them in their mouth and they can walk out of your office and go home. So once I do this wash impression of the upper and the lower, I always then insert the dentures and make sure that I verify the vertical dimension, make sure that I verify that I'm happy with the vertical dimension and that the patient is comfortable with that vertical dimension, that the bite is okay. Now, if for whatever reason you want to alter the vertical dimension, let's say that you want to increase the vertical dimension, then you can grab a little bit of wax and just add to the occlusal surfaces, maybe of the mandibular denture, and that way you can now obtain a new vertical dimension, because again, this is going to become important when scanning the bite for that initial vertical dimension comes into play. So keep that in mind. Either you're going to keep the same occlusion that the patient has in existing dentures, or you can modify it by adding wax, composite, whatever you want to add to the denture, either to increase. If you have to increase, you can add wax, or decrease. If you have to decrease, you can remove some of the tooth structure from the old dentures. Whatever you decide to do, you do those adjustments right there then, so that when you scan the occlusion, that occlusion is the one that you want to try to at least use initially. And again, once we do that, another thing that I like about the digital world is that I get a chance to scan, and I use my scanner. I use a Medit scanner in my office, and I literally grab my Medit scanner and I just have the patient smile, and then I scan the tip of the nose, the lips. You're seeing the facial scan. This is what I call my facial scan with the dentures in place. Now, this scan was obtained after I did the wash impression. So the dentures are nice and stable, because these particular dentures were not stable at all in the patient's mouth. And that's why he wanted a new set of dentures. So the dentures are there. I do the wash impression, I stabilize them, and then I scan his smile. The idea is that I add this as an additional scan into all the data that I'm gathering for the lab. So I'll show you later what the lab does with the facial scan. And how does this scan help the lab kind of design the denture and know exactly where to put or where to place the teeth. So again, you're just trying to give the lab as much information as you can. So once I've done this wash impression during that same first appointment, I remove the upper denture and I dry the tissue, and then I go ahead and scan the maxillary arch. Now scanning, at least with the Medit scanner, that's the one that I use, scanning the maxillary tissue, the maxillary edentulous arch, is very, very easy. It goes quickly, the scanner doesn't interrupt itself, it's very, very easy. Now, when it comes to the mandible, when it comes to the mandible, the tissue in the mandible, it's a little bit different. At least my scanner, the Medit scanner, doesn't do a good job there. At least the one that I have the Medit i700, doesn't do a really good job there. So what I tend to do for now that I have that scanner, I know that there's scanners out there that are becoming even better every day for scanning tissue. But what I tend to do, which I still enjoy and like a lot, is I just grab a tray, and I'll share with you the trays that I use, but I just make a very overextended alginate impression. And my goal is that when I'm taking that alginate impression and the alginate sets, I really want to feel that suction that I should be able to accomplish during that preliminary alginate impression. If you don't get a suction right, if you're not getting suction right there, then your denture may have a problem. So that's the reason why I still like scanning the mandibular arch, not only because my scanner is not good at scanning tissue in the mandibular arch, because there's a lot of mobile tissue, it shines a lot, the tongue is in the way, you get saliva in the way, so it's a little bit harder, at least for my scanner, to do. What I'm doing is I'm just taking an overextended, using an frame cut back a tray, which was designed by Dr. Abbey for his suction effective mandibular denture technique, and that's the technique that I'm using in my office, and I'll show you what that tray looks like. But I make my impression with that. I can then feel and hear the suction that I've created with that initial alginate impression, and all I do after that is scan the impression. I scan the impression, import all this data into the computer, and these are the trays that I'm using, the FCB trays, and again, this means frame cut back tray, which were designed by Dr. Abbey, again, for his suction effective mandibular denture. And they make them in these two sizes. Medium is the one that I use the most, but you have both options. You can sterilize them, they're plastic, and you can see that they have a cut back frame that allows the alginate to flow very easily. Now, I want you to keep in mind that there's a special technique on how to take impressions using these trays. I'm not going to talk about that specific technique during this webinar, But I do want you can find many of these videos on YouTube, and I want you to look at one of those videos before you go ahead and make this impression, because again, the idea is that this has to be an impression that when you remove the tray, you feel that suction, and now you know that your mandibular denture will have ideal suction, retention, stability into the inside the patient's mouth. So there you see my scanning of that alternate impression. That's what you're seeing on the left-hand side. And after that, all I do is I give all this data to the lab. So the lab has the tissue scan of the maxillary arch, the scan of my mandibular impression, alternate impression, and also the scan of the dentures. Now they merge all these scans together, they stitch them together, but when they do so, when they stitch the upper tissue with the intaglio of the upper denture and then the lower alternate impression, they invert that impression to make it a model, and then they stitch that to the wash impression of the mandibular denture. All this comes together at the determined vertical dimension that was given by these upper and lower dentures. So again, think about this process. You don't have to take a Facebook, you don't have to record any of that, because all that is being recorded in these dentures while you're going through these steps that I'm just walking you over. So now that is in the case that your patient walks into the door and has a denture. What happens if you have a patient that walks into your door and has no teeth? Now, this is a partially edentulous, and I'm going to quote unquote partially edentulous patient. This patient has some remaining teeth on the upper arch. All these teeth are periodontally involved. They all need to be extracted, but the patient doesn't want to do both dentures at the same time for just financial reasons. So we decided to keep the upper teeth. She had an upper maxillary partial. The occlusal plane was acceptable at this moment, so we decided to start with the mandibular denture. Now she still had two existing teeth, a canine and a premolar on the mandibular arch, and she also had a partial. Now this partial was initially held by 4 teeth, but during the last year, the patient had lost 2 of those 4 teeth, but I don't know how she was still able to wear this partial. So what I told her is, I'm going to extract the remaining teeth because they were super, super mobile. And I said, I'm not going to risk anything. I'm just going to remove those teeth. But while you're healing, I give it a couple of, maybe 10 days of healing. While you're healing, please keep in a safe place your mandibular partial. So what I was going to do is I was going to use her mandibular partial, do a wash impression with that mandibular partial, so that I can scan the intaglio of that mandibular partial and then stitch it to the impression, the alternate impression of that mandibular arch. So if you have a patient, and again, there's many ways of doing this. If you have a patient that has no teeth, but they have an old denture, an old partial, even if it doesn't fit well at the moment, you can use that as a wash impression, or you can simply fabricate a custom tray with a wax rim, use the custom tray for the final impression, use the wax rim for the vertical dimension, add a little bit of composite dots to your wax rim so that the scanner can read the wax, and then scan the wax rim with the impression, put it in the patient's mouth, and then scan the bite. Again, there's multiple ways that you can do this. This is just one way that I decided to do it for this particular patient. And you're seeing here's the partial. And again, there were no teeth left in the mandibular arch anymore when she came back from me to do the final impressions. But I told her not to throw away this partial because she was wearing the partial even though she only had 2 teeth holding the partial in place. So you can see here I've used some PVS material, some light PVS material, did a wash impression, just got it to kind of be stable in her mouth, enough stability so that she can, when she bit down, there was a centric bite, and that way I can get a vertical dimension that she was used to. That doesn't mean that I can't modify the vertical dimension, but at least I have something to start with. And honestly, I didn't modify the vertical dimension. I decided to keep the same one that she was used to, because again, this right now for me is only an interim denture, because we're then going to do the extraction of the maxillary teeth and then do the same in the maxillary arch. Again, we just didn't do both at the same time for financial reasons. So now you can see here, I have the maxillary arch that I scanned. I have the scan of the partial that I had a wash impression on the mandibular arch, and then I scanned the bite. And you can see on the left-hand side right here, there's a bite scan, and that bite scan is what the lab is going to use to merge all these files together, remove that denture from the arch and now had the vertical dimension that we had, that is determined by that partial. And here we go. Now the lab will design for us, instead of designing a tray, a custom tray, they actually designed for me a denture that I'm going to use as a custom tray, but the denture that already has teeth at the right vertical dimension, or at least at the vertical dimension that we chose to use with the patient's partial. So look at all the information that I get back from the lab. So in our second appointment, I can get now the final impression. Vertical dimension is there. If I need to make any alterations for the vertical dimension, I can add composite, I can add wax, or I can remove. If I need to reduce anything, I can remove some of these plastic teeth. And that's what I did. And I'll show you a video just a little bit later in my presentation. I'll show you a video of the day that I was taking this final impression with this tray that looks like a denture and acts like a denture and has vertical dimension and all that information again included. Again, I just want you to realize and think about everything that we gain in that first appointment, all that information that we're able to put together in that first appointment to then be able to submit it to the lab and give the lab much more information, because this is now, let's talk about now the trial denture design, because with all this information that we have given the lab, all they need to do is remove the dentures, add the teeth, and we're back to our initial patient. We're doing an upper and a lower denture, full denture, and now they've removed those dentures. Now at the right vertical, both the upper and the lower scans are at the right vertical dimension. They set the teeth first, and then they go in and you can see all the steps. And now they're designing the denture. And once they're designed the denture, what I ask them to do always is to send me a trial denture. I like to do a trial denture because the trial denture gives me the opportunity to check the occlusion. Again, don't forget, all this preliminary information that I obtained was using the patient's existing denture. So if I want to make any changes to it, and most likely you are going to need to make some changes, you want the lab to send you a trial denture, 3D printed, tooth colored. I don't add any pink to it. Everything is just one solid color. And with that denture, I can go in and you can see how they're using all this design to go in and look at the patient smile. That's what the facial scan is good for. All this information that you're giving the lab, they're using to design this denture. Now in their design, in their software design, and my lab uses exocad, in their software design, what they do is that they, of course, they use the pink and they use the white to differentiate the tissue from the teeth. But at the end of the day, once I have them print this initial denture that I call the trial denture, is going to be, they only send me the STL files and I go ahead and print these STL files directly into my office. And I use a very white resin to print these trial dentures. And this is the day that I'm actually putting these trial dentures in my patient's mouth. Now, for this, I've already altered the vertical dimension. And for this patient, what I did is I wanted to reduce the vertical dimension that the lab had initially given me. So I went ahead and I just flattened out, and you can see it right here. You can see how flat the premolars and the molars are on the mandibular denture. I did that on purpose so that when I had, because I was testing phonetics, and I can see that the space between the upper and the lower dentures in the inner occlusal space between them was very, very tight. I think that they were just too close. So I wanted to give a little bit more space, more room for my patient there. So I went ahead and I reduced the vertical that I was given by the lab. And again, you can now take a new bite using Regisil. You can do, or you can add wax. I mean, again, there's so many things so many ways that you can do this that you and I know already how to do that. So I'm not going to talk about that, but this is how you use or interpret the information given to you by these trial dentures. Now with the trial dentures, I'm going to show you these videos where I'm now testing the phonetics on my patient. Again, with the trial dentures and the vertical dimension already modified. And also the impressions, the wash impressions with these dentures were already obtained also, because I did do some wash impressions.
61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70.
Okay, you heard the patient counting from 60 to 70, good phonetics. You can see the way that the dentures are interacting in the patient's mouth. I was happy with that. And I want to show you now, he's eating a banana in my office with the trial dentures. Now you can see that he hasn't been used to cutting his food with his front teeth because his dentures were moving everywhere. That is a very raw banana, very sticky. He's biting, he's chewing on it. The mandibular denture is not going anywhere, even though he had no bone left. This patient is 100 years old. He's going to turn 101. He was turning 101 the day after I delivered the dentures, but he was eating. The dentures weren't moving anywhere. I knew that they were where they needed to be. So that wash impression was able just to help extend a little bit the borders, get that, that intaglio where it needs to be, so that now we can then send that back to the lab. And I don't even send the dentures, my wash impressions. I scan them again and send the new file to the lab, and then they will fabricate the dentures. And that you're seeing here on the right hand side, that those trial dentures, you can see that I've modified the vertical dimension of occlusion, and I have the wash impression. I did border molding and wash impression for these dentures because I did need to extend a little bit more the borders to get better suction, mainly on the mandibular denture. So what I do with that information, I scan the intaglio of the upper, I scan the intaglio of the lower, I scan all the teeth. So I scan everything that you see there, and I send this back to the lab through the MeditLink scan, the MeditLink app. So again, you don't have to send the physical impressions back to a lab. All you got to do is scan them in and send the scans back to the lab so that they can do now the final dentures. And now this is my third appointment. So my first appointment, gather the information. My second appointment, the trial denture, wash impressions, test phonetics, test vertical dimension, test chewing, test the function. And then my third appointment is going to be the day that I deliver. Again, I have here the final impressions with the bite and everything scanned down. I put that information in the software. Now, I want to share with you, I want to go back to that previous case where I was only doing the mandibular denture, because again, I want to show you how I do, what you should obtain with that wash impression on the mandibular arch when you do your border molding and your final wash impression with that trial denture. I want you to listen to this video. Now you can hear that it's suctioning inside when I'm putting pressure on that trial denture. She's biting down, I'm testing the vertical dimension, and now I'm going to remove the denture. Look at that suction. So, and you can see that even the patient is surprised. And I'm going to do it one more time. Look at the suction. You see that? So that's the kind of suction that you want to accomplish in this trial denture. In this trial denture, that's the kind of suction that you want to accomplish during this trial denture wash impression day. If you, now of course, I know that I got that same suction effect when I did my alternate impression, but then they designed a trial denture. The labs make the mistake that they eliminate, they try to reduce your denture to it for whatever crazy reason. And I always tell them specifically, full extension denture base. Don't cut it back. But if they do cut it back and you have a denture that's wiggling in the patient's mouth, go ahead and extend your borders a little bit. You can use heavy material for the border molding and then a light wash impression. And you should be able to hear and feel that there's a resistance of the denture when you want to pull it out. If you don't feel that, believe me, your final denture will not be stable either in the patient's mouth. So this is now my 100-year-old patient. The dentures have been completed. I'm inserting this in the patient's mouth. I adjust the occlusion as needed, and then I make sure that everything is nice and stable and that the patient can have phonetics with me now with the final or completed dentures. And you're going to watch a video soon. You can see we're having a conversation. I'm looking at the lip support. I'm looking at everything because this right now is my final appointment. This is the day that I'm delivering the denture. And I want you to watch this video and listen to me and the patient have a conversation with the final dentures inside the patient's mouth. And I want you to pay special attention to that mandibular denture where there was a completely resorbed ridge, but I want you to see how the patient has no issues with the denture. The denture doesn't go anywhere while we're having this conversation. So where were you born?
Greenville, South Carolina,
What year was that?
1923,
So when is your birthday?
September the 6th.
So it is tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
And look at the picture. So how many years are you going to be tomorrow?
101.
Wow, 101. Well, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to do your work for you and help you out with your, having a really good birthday tomorrow. Well, I do want to appreciate my patient. He authorized me to use this video here, and he's a wonderful gentleman. And I was actually pleased to be able to help him right before his birthday to get his new dentures and celebrate with his family. And this is what digital dentures actually do for you. You know, you're able to really be very you're very precise. All you have to think about is that you have to have a good protocol, a good sequence of steps, and understanding of what you're doing, right? It's taking me a little bit of time to get used to this technology, but every day I do more dentures and every day I'm happier with the results. Right now I'm working on the case that I just shared with you recently of that mandibular denture. I'm going to deliver it soon, and hopefully I can share with you through my YouTube channel also, so that you can see the results. And again, look into this alternate impression technique using that frame cutback tray. What that I know that if you use it correctly, you follow a good protocol, you can mix and match that with your digital scan, with the digital world, and get the results that very similar, if not identical, to the ones that I'm sharing with you today. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being part of our channel. And again, like us and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.